Hello everyone, this is Stas and welcome to my new TouchDesigner tutorial. And as I promised, this tutorial would be about the new feature of TouchDesigner, Sprinkle SOP. Here it is, Sprinkle SOP. And it was released in 2021 official update about a month ago. So if you're not updated yet, please do it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to use it. Even though before that it was also kind of similar operator called scatter, but the sprinkle have some really unique properties which I'm mostly excited about, and I explain it to you today. But first let me show you some examples how you could use it. It's super versatile in usage. You could think about it as generator of point clouds, and the most common use would be create a lot of points inside some kind of SOP, some kind of geometry, or on the surface of geometry. And then you could use instance to instance some boxes or spheres or whatever you like inside of it. You could also set the number of points in a sprinkle, and it will allow you to easily switch and blend between two different geometries. It both consists of the same amount of cubes. Okay, you could also use it in your different workflows, different setups. For example, here it is a curl noise with a sprinkle used as initial position, and here is one of my favorite trail SOP, well, not trail SOP, but trail made in tops, and I have tutorial about it. And this one is a Plexus like effect made with Vincent Houze disc chop component, and sprinkle used here to create a lot of dots on the surface of this cube, so this little fellow could walk with tentacles on these dots. I will explain how all of this organized in second half of the tutorial, because first I need to explain to you how this sprinkle SOP works. And all of this would be available on my Patreon page, but even if you're not my Patreon supporter, I'll explain how to create something similar. But overall, this is just examples. I hope you could create something your own with these amazing operators. Okay, here I have my backup with basic usage of Sprinkle if I need it, but let's do everything from scratch. Let's add a container, dive in, let's add some complex geometry. I prefer torus because it's nice. I prefer to change the radius a little bit. I like this torus, this shape. And let's use a sprinkle. Here it is. Everything worked. Super nice. Now it's sprinkled on the surface. Let me turn on the dots. Maybe it would be more visible if I create it like this. The sprinkle cooks only when geometry is changes. So it's quite heavy on the cook. As you could see, CPU cook time is almost half a second, but it cooks only, well, 2 times, because once I cooked for 1000 points and second one for 5000 points. So it's a good idea not to use a lot of modifiers and noises and transform before sprinkles, because then it will slow down super drastically. And also you could generate points not on the surface like here, but per primitive. It's almost the same, but not exactly, and I explain you why in a second. This is one of my favorite. The bounding box is bounds of this geometry. Probably it would be useful for creating some particles and this focal light or something like this. I never used it. And the approximate volume and the volume generates points inside geometry. Probably the difference between those two should be in performance, but in my test it cooks almost the same amount of milliseconds, so you could choose any of this. And you could set the number of points, the seed, because in a way it works like a noise and it creates the points, noisy points inside. So with different seed, the points would be a little bit different. And consolidate, we will talk about consolidate later. Okay, some interesting properties. If by some reasons you need to add transform before sprinkles, and for example the rotated, let me abs time seconds multiplied by, I don't know, 5. Is it rotating? Yeah, it's rotating. With volume or approximate volume, nothing happens. It cooks every time. It's super heavy. Even now I'm almost at 60 FPS. It's not a good idea. But if you use, for example, the surface, you could see that points stays on its places. And this is a very nice properties, because sometimes you need it. Sometimes you want this dots stays on its place. It works for surface and for bare primitive as well. And I'm not sure about this, I haven't tested it, but it seems that it's also almost stays in place, almost, but it moves a little bit. Okay, but transform it's better to use afterwards. And for example, after you do the sprinkle or after you convert it into top or inside the geometry component. What's more interesting is if you use noise, for example, and let's add a little bit of noise. Well, maybe a little bit more. Okay, with bound, the point stays almost the same. On a volume or approximate volume, it's not, of course, because the shape is very different. On a surface, it's not. But on a per primitive, and this is difference between per primitive and surface. In per primitive mode, the points stays the same, and this allows you to do different kind of stuff. Because if you add a noise afterwards, it wouldn't, the points wouldn't stay on its place. It would look like very noisy. And this is noisy as well, but all the noises are kind of on the same position relative to the neighbors. Okay. This is it. Yeah, and because it's called per primitive, for sure, if you add the primitive top, primitive, where are you? Here it is. I will set it to polygon. I'll set it here. And if I do something like, I don't know, rotating the primitives, the pivot point is the center of every primitive. And by the way, I have a tutorial about primitives. And let me copy paste. Oh, I deleted already. Okay. Apps time frame. Oops, yeah, it's super messy because if I add the facet before that and unique points and compute normals, now it's what I wanted to. Okay, now the primitives are rotating and the points stays on the same positions. I mean on the same position on each primitive. Okay, good. Next interesting property. You could convert this sprinkle, of course, to the top operator, because when you convert to top, you could do everything on GPU. You could do it old-fashioned way, or you could do it new way, and like in my last tutorial, this just a tiny bit faster. Or by the way, you could do it old-fashioned way, SOP to chop and chop to top. Okay, now I have this top. Let me add a note here, 71 by 71, and I could use it to create a geometry. Let me do it very fast. Let's call it position. It would be our position. It would be our position. Let's use the sphere. Probably it should be a super small sphere. Let me decrease radius here, and maybe I'll need to decrease it here as well, and create the geometry. Okay, geometry and the standard rendering setup. A camera, connect the light to the camera. Oops. Okay. Connect the light to the camera. What's happening? I can't. Okay, that's it. And turn on instancing, and I will use this as a position, and RGB. Yeah, for sure I need to scale it down a little bit and create a renderer. So let it be a font material, and I'll increase the performance a little bit by turning this off and turn the camera off, and the render. Let's make it square. Okay, good. And maybe I like to have the shape a little bit more interesting, so I'll add the twist, and I twist it just a tiny bit. Okay, that's it. That would be our setup, and let's talk about different properties. One of it is, of course, here you could, before position, you could add, for example, a little bit of noise, output noise, not monochrome, maybe. Okay, let's be simplex, and let's add this noise to the position. But let's first set the pixel format and noise amplitude not so much. Okay, and if I animate this noise, you could have effect like some moving molecules or something like this. Maybe it's a little bit too fast, and maybe it's a little bit too much. Anyway, but yeah, you could predict this. And it's, by the way, it's all similar for any other tools with working with point clouds. It would be the same. And for example, if I add the crop, this is interesting one. If I add a crop here, and if I crop it down, okay, let me turn off noise now, so it would be more visible. It just cuts some of our points inside. And depending on what kind of setup here you have, sometimes it's better to sort the points. Oops, not here, but after the sprinkle. So you sprinkle first and then sort points by random. And now if I crop it, it's kind of randomly decrease amount of points. why it's not working, and that's not working because I need to set nearest pixel. Now it should work just fine. Let's test it. And yeah, and it did. Now it's work very nice and smooth. And what it gives you, you could create a lot of points inside. For example, well, it's not a lot, but okay, this is probably a lot. Well, maybe, yeah, maybe this is too much for my GPU. Okay, let's do it like this. Probably it's too much for my GPU, mostly because of these spheres. If I set it to the boxes, it would be much better. Okay, just because I don't like FPS 2, let's stop with 50,000. Okay, and let's set it to the box, because yeah, it's still a little bit too slow on my computer. Okay, now it's fine. And why to do this? You could create a lot of sprinkles inside. Oh yeah, let's create it inside. Yeah, so it would be inside, much more than you needed. And then create the top operator, and you could save this top operator. You couldn't save it straightforward with movie file out, because it will save in 8-bit number, and you need to have 32 bits. But you could use the operator called, what's going on today? Okay, the operator called pack. Here it is. And what it does, it converts 32 bits or 16 bits float into 8-bit floats, or 8-bit fixed. And after that you need to unpack it back with the same operator, unpack RGB A. And if I connect, now I have very same. But this one, 8-bit flow, 8-bit fixed, you could save it into the file. You would be limited by resolution if you have uncommercial version, and with commercial you almost unlimited. Let me share a little hack with you. If you're on uncommercial version, you could also just lock this operator and save the file, and this operator with all of its data would be saved as well, but the file size would be quite a large. Okay, so for example, you have a saved operator. Let me imitate that I have saved operator. And for example, in your today's setup, you don't need so much points. So you could set the crop and leave the amount of points that you need. And you could check the amount of points here. I have 5,600 points. All right. So the crop tool is very nice to have. Let me unlock it. What's going on? Here, what's going on? And let me set it back to 5. And let's create some other operator, for example, the box. And I will sprinkle on the surface of the box. Sprinkle, where are you again? Yeah, here it is, the sprinkle. And I will use the same number of points, copy, paste, bind on the surface. And let me copy paste this as well. And I don't need noise, I don't need crop, but I would need switch. If I switch here, switch, Okay, if I switch here, I could do and blend and set a blend between inputs. I could transform my torus into cube and vice versa. Let me, by the way, make it a little bit more colorful so you could see it better, and maybe even set some rim. Here you, and chin chin chin. Okay, this is ugly. All right, good. So it's now, hopefully it's more visible. And so in this way, because all of this, both of these have the same amount of points, and these top operators have the same amount of points, you could easily switch between those. Actually, you could probably switch even if it's not the same amount of points, but having the same amount of points would be helpful. And also you could create for example, the noise. Let me do it this way, it would be a little bit easier. Less typing. Oops. Let's create a noise and offset to 1 and noise amplitude to 0.3, for example. And let's do it randomly, and the resolution pixel format is 16-bit float mono, and here's my resolution. And if I set it as a scale, and use it for instances, RRR, now I have my points with the different scales. Probably it's not super visible, so let me increase let's have offset 2 and amplitude 1.8. So we have a large boxes and a small boxes. All right, and yeah, large boxes and small boxes. Okay, and of course you could the same technique creates the colors and everything you want. Okay, what else did I want to show you? Let me check. Yeah, I showed you a switch. Here, by the way, I use the auth method. It's just sprinkle, SOP to chop, chop to top. It works the same. Sprinkle, comp, math. What's going on with math? I can't remember. Oh yeah. Different compositing, like here hard light, different math, different function tops will allow you to create some very strange looking effects, like here. And if you would try to create it with geometry, with the SOPs or even with chops, it could be quite a difficult task to do, to make some of the points jumps. And here I just accidentally did this. I don't know, I like how it looks. So do explore this experiment with different composites, different maths, different functions. For example, let me try to, I don't know, let's just do arc tangents. No, it doesn't look good. Oh, maybe if I set to radians. Well, okay. Cycles, not so much. Arc sine, well, also kind of fine. Hyperbolic tangent with cycles. All right, so just experiment with all of these strange functions, and it will increase the different possibilities. Alright, that's it for the basics, and let me show you different kind of tools that I experimented and that I did. Here is the most simple one. What I did is the same. I have the sprinkle on a sphere with number of points like for hundreds, the grid with same amount of points for hundreds, and then I use the switch. And now if I use my slider, I could switch between this messy sphere on the center and this grid with a banana near the camera. And if you do it different setup with different geometry, you could imitate the cubes that fall on the floor and form a banana or something else. Super easy. Okay, this one is I almost showed to you already. I called it packing because with Sprinkle Top you could imitate in a way the sphere pack algorithm or the box pack. Well, let me first show you the box pack because this is much easier. I already have a tutorial about voxelization everything, and this is just it. You create a position with the top and you use limit and set offset and quantize it to the floor with a value the same as here on consolidate. And I forgot to tell you what consolidate does is it creates it sprinkles, in this case inside, a lot of points, but it will delete all the points that are closer to each other than 0.1. So, and it's not a perfect packing, so some of the distances could be more than 0.1, but none of the distance between points would be less than 0.1. Of course, it would be even more nice to have some exact distance, but right now it's not possible, so let's just do the maximum distance is 0.1. So if I have the same quantization and the same box scale, now I have my boxes stack to each other side by side very perfectly. And with a sphere packing is the same. But now what you need to do is when you're creating a sphere, here I have a sphere of radius 1, and my scale is uniform scale set to the same position, but overall scale set to 0.5 because the sphere is made with radius. So because it's radius, you need to multiply it by 0.5, or I forgot this word, this how it's called, oh, divide, yeah, or divide by 2, yeah. And if you don't like this perfect packing, you could use the math or noise or whatever you like to create the spheres of different sizes. It also could be interesting. And this is colorization, and again I have tutorial about colorization as well. What did I have else? Oh, this cheap shadows, and again I have tutorial about cheap shadows. I have a lot of tutorials. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Plexus. And this is kind of not why my key it didn't work. Okay. As I said, this is Sprinkle, a lot of points on the surface of a box, and just a faceted sphere. And I used this amazing tool, Plexus tool by Vincent Houze, sorry if I misspelled your name, called Dist Threshold Job. So you just look at release page, install it properly, and it will add a custom operator here called Dist Threshold. And then you could use it with a custom GLSL to create this Plexus-like effect. And it's all documented, and in this repository also there is this lines GLSL, so you don't need to code it by yourself, but if you want you could dive in and do something with lines and render it differently, and that's it. It's just an idea that sometimes have a Plexus with a Sprinkle. It could be a very nice combination. For example, you could, I don't know, you could use one job as a Kinect, for example, so your silhouette, and another job with your room as a box, or maybe second Kinect player, and create this Plexus effect, the lines between those two. Very nice. Okay, let's dive out. This is from tutorial about coral noise, and I leave a link in the description. Something happens to my memory today. I can't remember who did this tutorial. Let me check, because yeah, I need to set who is this tutorial. Oh, of course, this is from Bruno Imbrisi, sure. And here I'm using the Sprinkle to create the initial position of my swarm of Tori. Alright, this is it. Boom, boom. And this is trail, and I have a big tutorial about how to create the trail effect. And so again, the same Sprinkle. And one more thing that I didn't know when I did this trail tutorial is this interesting method, and Aurelian, or as you know, Packet Valve, told me about this interesting tool recently. If in your feedback loop you insert a cache here, if you insert a cache and set the output index like minus something, so it will slow down the feedback effect, because by default it goes like 60 frames per second, and your trails would be created quite frequently. But if you output like -5, it will create the new trail position every 5 frames, and this will allow you to create a little bit different looking trails. All right, that's it. Let me quit. Okay, so I think that's it. That's all I wanted to show you about this amazing Sprinkle SOP, and leave a comment if you find some other interesting method of using it, or if you have a question, please contact me here in the comments, or on my Patreon page, or on Instagram, or somewhere else. And that's it. Bye bye. See you next time.